I never wanted the spotlight, and I certainly never asked for the praise. I just fixed things, and I did it quietly. The day the $300 million global rebrand for Atherton Beverages was about to implode, I was in my corner office sipping on lukewarm tea from a mug that said, "World's Okayest Strategist." My mission was to rewrite a liability clause so meticulously it could bring a corporate lawyer to tears. The junior associate on the team had slipped a generic indemnity into a section that, on paper, made our client liable for every international market fluctuation, a detail that could have sunk the entire campaign. Mr. Atherton, the CEO, and already a heart attack waiting to happen, didn't call the legal team. He didn't call the account lead. He called me directly. "Get me Emma," he barked into the phone. "Not the spreadsheet jockeys." So there I was, in a third-floor office that hadn't seen a sunbeam since dial-up was a thing, rewriting 6 pages of legal jargon into language so clean it could have been baptized. I didn't need the credit, and I never waited for thanks. By the time the revised PDFs were sent out, Mr. Atherton had already calmed down. His final email to the agency was just a single line. "Emma got it done. Proceed." The CEO forwarded it to the entire senior team like he'd personally brokered world peace. I didn't even open the thread. I was already on to the next silent catastrophe. I had been with Stratagem Solutions for 24 years. I didn't wear blazers the color of optimism, and I didn't network. My superpower was answering the phone when everyone else was too afraid. When a new competitor blindsided a market launch, they called me. When a client's heir threatened to dissolve a trust and turn the assets into NFTs, they called me. I wasn't just a project manager. I was the relationship itself. My office was a paper jungle of annotated contracts, color-coded sticky tabs, and legal pads that would give a graphic designer an aneurysm. My desktop background was a stock photo of a beach, because I liked the ocean and disliked faces. I wore cardigans that doubled as emotional armor and flats with the dignity of a woman who hadn't worn heels since Y2K. And yet, I moved like an institution. Slow, deliberate, essential. The unspoken truth inside Stratagem was that if Atherton Beverages had a question, they didn't go through official channels. They called my direct line. Not the team, not the partner in charge. They called me. And I always answered on the second ring. Some of the new hires whispered, I had dirt on everyone. The executives joked that I had Mr. Atherton's will in my filing cabinet. The reality was that I just remembered birthdays, grandchildren, divorce settlements, and the exact number of times Mr. Atherton had been stranded in a resort holding cell during that questionable yacht scandal of 2003. That level of trust wasn't built. It was earned through decades of showing up, shutting up, and fixing it. I walked past the conference room where Brandon Sterling, the founder's 28-year-old son with a business degree and hair gel that defied gravity, was shouting about redefining the sales funnel. I barely glanced through the glass. Just another exec with a pitch deck and a midlife crisis. He didn't acknowledge me. To the new guard, I was just background furniture. Reliable, invisible, and due for replacement. But that was fine. I wasn't there to be seen. I just made sure the firm didn't quietly bleed out. As I passed the HR director, who was clutching a spreadsheet full of layoffs, I felt a tiny tremor beneath my feet. A whisper of change, like the air before a tornado. I didn't know it yet, but the storm was coming, and I was about to be the calm eye in the middle of it, until someone mistook my stillness for irrelevance. The first sign was wrapped in buzzwords. Brandon stormed into the firm like he was rebranding Jesus. His transformation initiative kicked off with a Monday all-hands meeting featuring a PowerPoint deck titled Operation Elevate, with the E stylized like a rocket launch. He talked about synergy acceleration and flattening communication bottlenecks, which apparently meant installing a ping-pong table and firing anyone who couldn't run a brainstorming session through Miro. I sat in the back, arms folded, my lips twitching at the word legacy overhead. I wasn't sure if he meant me or the filing cabinets that hadn't moved since Clinton was in office. Either way, I didn't like the tone. Brandon made it worse. During a meeting about the Atherton account, which I hadn't even been invited to, a junior exec laughed and said, "Those guys don't even use Slack. They still fax stuff." Brandon snorted, loud and theatrical. "Well, that's why we're modernizing. Can't scale relationships stuck in the 90s. I said nothing. I just tapped my pen against a yellow legal pad and walked away. But something had shifted in my gut. It wasn't just that they were ignorant. It was that they were proud of it. Within a week, I noticed my calendar being cleared for strategic alignment. My access to the client CRM was quietly downgraded. Brandon's new chief of staff, a girl named Chelsea, who still had her sorority tagline in her email signature, sent me a list of sunsetting legacy workflows. My name was on 3 of them. I didn't rage. I didn't complain. I started packing, not boxes, but data. I plugged a dusty USB drive into my home desktop and began backing up key communications, contracts, and contact logs, including all the side notes from Mr. Atherton about upcoming projects. I wasn't stealing. I was safeguarding, because I knew what they didn't. Relationships are built on memory, and memory dies fast in reorgs. Late one night, I opened my drawer and pulled out a handwritten card Mr. Atherton had sent me after my father passed. "Take the time you need, Emma. Family first. We'll be here when you're back." I ran my finger along the gold ink. That card had more loyalty in it than every single motivational poster Brandon plastered on the office walls. But loyalty, I realized, didn't count for much under fluorescent lights anymore. The firm changed around me like accelerated decay. New branding, a new slogan, legacy reimagined. They started using Slack channels named things like #ClientLove and BizDevBlitz. Someone replaced the break room coffee with mushroom adaptogen tea. I tried it once. It tasted like regret and mulch. I went to one of Brandon's workshops just to observe. It was titled Disruption Mindset. Halfway through, he pulled up a chart showing client tiers. Atherton Beverages was marked with a red asterisk. "Too high touch," he said. "Too dependent on non-scalable human capital." I blinked. Non-scalable human capital. That's what I was now. I stood in the back, arms crossed over a navy cardigan that had witnessed 100 closings and 2 embezzlement scandals, and watched as a man with no scars tried to cut me out of the firm's bloodstream. He was surgically removing the organ that kept their biggest client alive and smiling while he did it. I didn't storm out. I just left early, walked past the receptionist who didn't look up, and went home. That night, I updated my personal contact spreadsheet, highlighting every key phone number and exporting 2 decades of relationship history into a folder labeled "Just in Case." Because I didn't start wars, I prepared for them. And Brandon? He just lit the fuse. It happened on a Friday. They always choose Fridays. I logged into a 9 a.m. Zoom meeting labeled Org Sync, Leadership Realignment. I was expecting more of Brandon's digital theater. Maybe another consultant named Skylar pushing out of context Steve Jobs quotes. Instead, I was greeted by a 5-tile Brady Bunch of doom. Brandon, HR, legal, Chelsea, and some random guy from people operations who looked like he'd built his personality out of LinkedIn hashtags. "Emma," Brandon said, his voice flat as copper. "Thank you for joining on short notice." That was the prelude. I'd written that line in enough termination letters to smell it from a mile away. "We're streamlining some of our legacy roles to better align with the firm's forward-facing growth culture," he said, reading from a script like it was a Yelp review of his own cowardice. "Your role, while valuable, no longer fits our strategic trajectory. Some folks just can't keep up with the pace we're setting." I stared at the screen. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I just tilted my head slightly, like a dog hearing static. "Can't keep up?" The last time Brandon pulled an all-nighter, it was because his food delivery app crashed. HR piped in with a rehearsed sympathy voice. You'll receive a formal severance package. We've already started the access transition. Access transition, Jesus Christ. Behind the words, I felt something sink, deep and ancient. 2 decades of 6 a.m. crisis calls, handwritten notes from grieving clients, and 12-hour days spent fixing what other people broke. Not sadness, not rage, just the hollow click of a door locking behind my soul. I understand, I said simply. Brandon nodded like I'd given him permission to sleep better. We appreciate your years of service. That was it. The screen went dark. 5 seconds later, my email froze, then my Slack, then my VPN. They were fast, at least. Cold, but efficient. An intern I didn't know escorted me from my office like I was a shoplifter. I took my time, gathered my things, my mug, my framed photo of my dog Murphy, now long gone, and that Atherton card still tucked in my desk drawer like a secret handshake with the past. I placed them gently in the cardboard box they gave me. No one came to say goodbye. No one made eye contact. No one even offered a damn tissue. Outside, the sun hit my skin like I'd forgotten it could. My car smelled like lavender air freshener and old coffee. I sat in the front seat, closed the door, and just breathed. Once, twice. Then I started the engine and drove to the one place that mattered more than stratagem ever had. Home. That evening, I opened a bottle of Cabernet, usually reserved for estate settlements or funerals. I lit a candle I hated, gifted by Chelsea last Christmas, and poured myself a glass. The email came in at 7:04 p.m. from legal. Subject line, severance agreement, signature required by Monday. I didn't open it. Instead, I opened my black notebook, the one I used when things truly mattered. Page 1, clean. I wrote a single name, Atherton. Below it, if you ever leave, so do we. I underlined it. I didn't weep. I didn't scream. I just wrote bullet points, names, dates, conditions. The weight of silence was immense, but the hum in my chest told me something louder was coming. Not noise, not revenge, precision. I poured another glass, booted up my personal laptop, and opened my contacts. I wasn't going back. I was burning the map. By Monday morning, the office was already nursing a post-termination hangover. No one said my name out loud, but my absence lingered like the ghost of competence. The break room fridge still had my labeled yogurt. My orchid wilted on the windowsill, its petals curling inward like they'd heard the news, too. Brandon, of course, strutted in like he'd slain a dragon. He slapped backs, used words like nimble realignment, and had Chelsea schedule a lunch with a visionary UX consultant who'd apparently revolutionized e-commerce funnels for high-end baby clothes. Meanwhile, the junior team was panicking over the Atherton portfolio handoff. "They're old school," muttered one junior partner. "We sent over the onboarding deck and got no reply. They faxed a memo last night," said another, holding up a crinkled paper with one line. Emma. That morning, Atherton Beverages called the main line twice. No voicemail, just silence, then hang-ups. Ryan Atherton, the son, sent a curt Slack message. "Need to speak with Morgan regarding the new rebrand documents. Please advise." It bounced. My account was already deleted. Brandon skimmed it and shrugged. "They'll adapt. This is how we grow." By Wednesday, he'd reassigned the account to Chelsea, who responded with a Google Doc link titled A&B Modern Touchpoint Strategy. She decorated it with emojis and sent it to Mr. Atherton directly. 3 hours later, his office issued a formal notice. "Meeting declined. Please cease outreach until further notice." Brandon still didn't flinch. "They're bluffing," he told the board, just rattled by the shift. They weren't bluffing. At precisely 2:15 on Thursday, I stepped onto the manicured lawn of Mr. Atherton's country club, wearing a navy blazer with the kind of dignity no timesheet ever earned. A young valet tried to ask for my name, but a hand on his shoulder stopped him. Mr. Atherton stood near the hedges, squinting into the sunlight like he could smell Brandon's cologne from 2 counties away. I approached with the grace of a woman who never needed to knock on a door, only wait for it to swing open. "Emma," Mr. Atherton said, his voice the sound of gravel and bourbon. I nodded. "I'm no longer with Stratagem." He didn't blink. He just reached into his blazer, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and handed it to me. "Then neither are we." The paper was a termination letter, unsigned but already dated. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply folded it back up and tucked it into my handbag like it was a dry cleaning receipt. We sat in silence under a striped awning overlooking a fountain funded by a tax loophole. Mr. Atherton poured us 2 glasses of something older than Brandon's startup phase and said, "I'm tired of being treated like a case study." I nodded. "They see numbers, you see names." "That's why we trusted you," he said. Then he leaned in, his voice low. "We'd like to hire you. Independent advisory role. You choose the firm we move to next." I didn't answer. Not yet. I just stood, shook his hand, and walked back to my car. That night at my kitchen table, I pulled out my old LLC paperwork. EM Strategies. It still smelled like toner and hope. I opened my laptop, clicked New Email, and started writing. Subject: Transition support available for select clients. To my private contacts list, I wrote, "If you've heard the rumors, they're true. I am no longer with Stratagem, but I'm still working, and I'm still Emma." The replies started pouring in before I could hit refresh. The fall was over. Now came the climb. The next morning, I rolled up my sleeves like I was back in the war room. Except this time, there were no whiteboards, no interns scribbling buzzwords. Just me, a 12-year-old Epson printer with an attitude problem, and a thick folder labeled EM, Strategies, LLC Revival. I dug through my old business bank documents, called the state licensing board to reactivate my consulting certificate, and scheduled a digital signature for my new retainer templates. Everything had a faint smell of dust and second chances. I clicked submit on my updated LLC filing. It felt less like a formality and more like a middle finger aimed in the general direction of Brandon's haircut. By 3 p.m., the calls started. Quiet ones. Old clients with nervous voices and blocked numbers. "Hey, Emma, is it true? You're out? I heard you're consulting again, confidentially. Can you look at our supplier contracts? Please don't tell anyone I called. But if you were available, we'd be interested." I kept my responses short, calm, and professional. "Yes, I'm available. Let's talk this week. Confidentiality is guaranteed." But behind the screen, I was already building a spreadsheet with columns for client names, risk exposure, executive contacts, and contract expiration dates, the same way you'd prepare for a war, one whisper at a time. Late that evening, a familiar ping lit up my personal phone. A number I knew, but the message was unmistakably from Taylor, an ambitious junior associate who used to shadow me like a Labrador in kitten heels. "Hey, just FYI, things are weird here. Like, really weird." I didn't respond immediately. I let it breathe. Then I typed, "Define weird." The dots danced for a few seconds. Then came the download. "They're panicking. Brandon keeps calling meetings about narrative control," Chelsea cried in the hallway. "Client services missed a reporting deadline and legal is blaming data handoff issues." I sipped my tea and typed carefully. "Is Atherton's record still marked active?" More dots. Then, yes. But the contact log shows no response for the last 6 interactions. I felt it then. That tight click in my chest. Not excitement. Not vengeance. Something colder. Validation. I waited a beat, then asked, Can you access the client retention report? You mean the report? That made me raise an eyebrow. RE stood for revenue erosion, a weekly internal snapshot that tracked how close each client was to bolting. Exactly that. Can you send me a screenshot? 10 minutes later, it landed in my inbox. The thing was hemorrhaging. Of the firm's top 12 accounts, 8 had downgraded their service tier. 3 had paused renewals. 2 had gone dark, meaning they weren't returning calls or emails. And in big, angry letters under Atherton Beverages, at risk, loss of primary relationship point, Morgan. I leaned back in my chair, the room dim except for the glow of my laptop and the soft jazz my Spotify had queued up by accident. Brandon was already bleeding. He just didn't know how deep the cut went. I opened a blank document titled Transition Plan. Tier 1 Clients. At the top, I wrote, Phase 1. Listen. Phase 2. Offer quiet solutions. Phase 3. Take what's already mine. The war was never going to be fought with noise. It would be fought with silence, spreadsheets, and surgical precision. I didn't need to torch stratagem. I just had to wait for gravity. Brandon was calling it the Innovation Showcase. He printed glossy invitations, booked the 12th floor conference center, and brought in an experienced consultant to arrange succulents and fresh eucalyptus around iPads no one would touch. He ordered sushi boats, a DJ, and a goddamn ice sculpture shaped like a rocket ship labeled Vision. Across town, I stirred cream into my coffee with a ballpoint pen and waited for my phone to ring. It did, at 9:06 a.m., sharp. Miss Morgan, came the voice, smooth and formal. It was Atherton's legal counsel. We've sent formal termination notice to Stratagem, effective immediately. A copy has been couriered to both their general counsel and board chair. I didn't say anything for a beat. I just breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth. The letter landed like a warhead. Inside Stratagem's glass tower, legal scrambled to intercept it, but it was too late. Copies had already hit every board member's inbox. It was short, brutal, and decisive. Due to the unexpected departure of our primary relationship steward, we no longer believe Stratagem Solutions can meet the fiduciary or operational expectations of our trust. As such, our relationship is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Brandon didn't even make it through the edamame appetizer before the board VP's face turned white. Did you know this was coming? One of them hissed. Brandon blinked. They're just reacting emotionally. Emotionally? Said another. We told you Atherton was non-negotiable, and you removed the one person they trusted. By the time Brandon opened the termination letter, the DJ was already packing up. I didn't gloat. Instead, I pulled up the final draft of the consulting agreement Atherton's counsel had sent me 2 nights earlier. I'd spent hours annotating it, redlining every clause that treated me like a temp, and inserting 2 key conditions. I would not advise them back to Stratagem under any circumstance, and I would select their next firm personally, with veto power over any candidate. The Atherton family signed without blinking. That afternoon, I met Mr. Atherton again, this time in the private conference room of a boutique wealth firm in Midtown. He looked 10 years younger than he had on the golf course. We need a new home, he said, spreading open profiles of competing firms like tarot cards. And you're the only person I trust to find it. I flipped through the files slowly. I'll vet everyone, but my name stays out of it. Understood? He said. They'll know your fingerprints, not your face. We toasted with black coffee. No ceremony. Just 2 people who understood the difference between noise and consequence. Meanwhile, back at Stratagem, Chelsea was in Brandon's office, white as a napkin, showing him the updated CRM. Another client just flagged a relationship gap, she whispered. It's contagious. They're calling it the Morgan effect. Brandon scoffed. It's just a temporary market reaction, but even he didn't believe it. His hand trembled slightly as he minimized the window. 3 more emails arrived from clients requesting updated points of contact. All of them had once answered only to me. By sundown, my new LLC email was flooded with NDAs, inquiries, and soft offers. I didn't rush. I replied to one, happy to discuss terms. Please note, my schedule is selective. I poured myself a whiskey neat and watched the skyline flicker to life. Somewhere, Brandon was probably still trying to spin his showcase as a culture pivot. But the board didn't care about buzzwords anymore. They wanted results, and results had left the building wearing orthopedic flats and carrying a cardboard box. Brandon's first official response to losing Atherton came in the form of a 1,400-word internal memo titled, Strategic Realignment of Legacy Client Dependencies. It was an Olympic-level gaslight. He claimed the loss was part of a broader repositioning strategy, that it was mutually beneficial, and, most galling of all, that the decision had been made in consultation with senior leadership. Chelsea proofread it, legal revised it, HR polished it, but by the time it hit inboxes, the damage had already metastasized. 3 hours later, the board called an emergency meeting. Brandon sat at the head of the table, palms sweating through his $300 shirt, while the oldest member of the board, Hamilton Ellis, who I used to send whiskey truffles every Christmas, held the termination letter in one hand and a printed copy of Atherton's original onboarding contract in the other. Do you read this? Hamilton asked, his voice like sandpaper soaked in disdain. Brandon nodded once, then backpedaled. I mean, yes, I was briefed on its general terms. Hamilton tapped the paper. Then you missed Section 3C. All material changes in designated stewardship must receive written pre-approval from the advisory board. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. That clause alone could trigger a breach of service lawsuit worth more than Brandon's entire innovation budget. Brandon stammered something about changing stewardship models. Dynamic service recalibration left his lips. No one blinked. The next day, the board quietly hired a private firm to review internal communications. Not for sabotage, just for stupidity. They found plenty. Slack logs where Chelsea joked that Emma has boomer loyalty cult energy. Emails where Brandon called me institutionally immobile. A deleted memo suggesting that legacy clients be gently weaned off codependence. Every log, every snide comment, every decision made without a single nod to due process. It all stacked like firewood under Brandon's credibility. I didn't need to leak a thing. The house was already burning. From my corner apartment overlooking the river, I read the reports forwarded to me by my former assistant, who was fully moonlighting as a double agent. One file included a spreadsheet titled Client Relationship Exposure Post-Morgan. It was mostly red. Next to Atherton's entry, someone had written in all caps, "Who signed off on this?" I smiled just slightly. My phone buzzed that night. A private number. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Emma?" said a voice I hadn't heard in 6 years. It was Alan Sterling, the old chairman, co-founder, retired now but not disconnected. His voice was slower, raspier, but not weak. "I assume you've seen the fallout." "I've seen pieces," I said. "You didn't leak anything." "No need," I replied. "They did it to themselves." He chuckled once, dry and short. "I always told my son the firm had arteries. He thought it had code." I said nothing. Then he said what I'd been waiting for all along. "You were the artery." I leaned against the window, the glass cool against my temple. "Why are you calling, Alan?" "Because the board wants to speak with you, informally." "Tomorrow. Just a conversation." I thought for a moment. "Send it through my assistant," I said. "She'll check my availability." And just like that, the tide crested. Brandon was still inside the building, flailing like a CEO on stilts, unaware the undertow had already dragged him past the point of no return. I didn't need revenge. I had gravity on my side. The offer came in the form of a breathless voicemail from a board VP who used to call me the office historian like it was a compliment. His voice cracked halfway through my name. Emma, Ms. Morgan, we're reevaluating recent structural decisions. The board believes your institutional knowledge is indispensable, and we'd like to formally explore a strategic return, if that's something you'd be open to. I listened to it while brushing crumbs off my keyboard. I didn't bother replaying it. I just hit delete and opened a fresh Google Doc titled Advisory Rates, EM Strategies, LLC. That afternoon, I typed up a one-paragraph response and had my assistant send it on embossed letterhead, not email, letterhead delivered by courier. Let them feel the formality. While I am not interested in returning as an employee, I am open to offering limited advisory support under contract through my firm. Rates begin at 3x my previous annual compensation, with all client portfolio decisions routed through my office. Terms non-negotiable. Kindly advise within 48 hours if you wish to proceed. I didn't sign it with a closing. I signed it, Emma. No titles, no fluff. Just the name that was now haunting every boardroom PowerPoint like a ghost with receipts. Within 24 hours, Stratagem bled again. 2 more legacy clients submitted termination letters. One cited a breakdown in continuity. The other was more blunt. If Emma Morgan is no longer a part of this firm, then neither are we. The firm's private Slack, what was left of it, buzzed with muted chaos. Brandon tried to act like it was all part of some strategic pivot. Chelsea was overheard crying again, this time in the parking garage, phone to her ear, muttering, I didn't know she had that kind of pull. The internal dashboard for the CRM showed total revenue at risk had ballooned to 38%. The title of the internal emergency report was The Morgan Exodus. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my lawyer with a single line. Add hazard premium to advisory proposal. Then I called a mutual friend, Jules, who still worked in procurement for one of the hemorrhaging clients. I kept it short. Tell him, I said, if he wants to disrupt the old model, this is what disruption looks like. Jules laughed. He's already sweating through 3 shirts a day. You want me to twist the knife? No, I said. Just let him learn how fast the future really moves. That night, as emails piled in from clients seeking guidance, I sipped my whiskey and watched the stock tickers for 2 of the firms I'd shortlisted for Atherton. One was rising, the other tanked after losing a major referral I'd quietly pulled. My influence didn't look like fireworks. It looked like margin shifts and policy rewrites and voicemail trails that no one dared admit I still had copies of. The firm had thought they were evolving. What they failed to understand was this. I was the evolution, and I didn't need a seat at their table. I was building my own. When Alan Sterling, co-founder and patriarch of the firm, returned from his semi-retirement in Maine, the office buzzed like a fire alarm with a dying battery, shrill, confused, and warning of doom a little too late. He arrived in a gray wool coat and in silence. No warm welcomes, no town halls. Just a private meeting with the board where they slid over a stack of termination letters, client losses, and internal memos riddled with the same name, Emma Morgan. He read each one slowly. Atherton Beverages, Heroin Capital, Inley Trust. Every single one cited loss of key personnel, stewardship concerns, or his personal favorite, the absence of strategic continuity following the departure of Miss Morgan. He looked up, his face unreadable. "And where's my son?" he asked. Brandon was on the 10th floor, pacing, sweat gathering beneath his tailored collar, trying to prep for a presentation that no one would ever hear. Chelsea was red-eyed in the corner, typing out a resume draft and whispering prayers to Indeed.com. Alan entered the room without knocking. He stood at the head of the table and gestured. "Out," he said. Chelsea fled. Brandon straightened, smiling too wide. Alan, I was going to loop you in. We've hit a rough patch, but Alan held up a single sheet of paper. Mr. Atherton's letter, the one I had read like scripture. This is your legacy, Alan said. You didn't lose a client. You lost our foundation. Brandon sputtered. She was slowing us down. She was the pace. Alan cut in, his voice like gravel under pressure. And you fired her because she didn't use Slack. Brandon opened his mouth, then closed it. That afternoon, the firm issued a company-wide memo. Effective immediately, Brandon Sterling is transitioning into a non-executive role. All client-facing responsibilities will be reassigned. His key card was deactivated before the ink dried. His calendar emptied. His name erased from the signature footer template. And I wasn't watching. I was 30 miles off the coast, barefoot on the deck of a private yacht, cutting through deep blue water. A chilled bottle of champagne sat between me and Mr. Atherton, who was grinning like a man freshly unburdened. Ready? He asked, sliding the contract across the teak table. It was the first 7-figure retainer of my newly baptized firm, EM Strategies. Not a dime of it owed to the company that once called me obsolete. I signed it with my full name, no title, no flourish, just a signature that now moved empires. As the sun dipped low, I looked out across the water, serene. No vindictive smile, no monologue, just stillness. I took a slow sip of my drink and said, more to the wind than to anyone. Sometimes it takes a veteran to shut the whole thing down efficiently. No fire, no explosions, just silence, competence, and the unmistakable sound of a door closing behind you for good. The lesson in this story is that true value isn't always loud or flashy. It's often quiet, built over years of hard work, trust, and dedication. In a world obsessed with new trends and disruption, don't mistake experience for obsolescence. Your genuine relationships and unwavering competence are your most powerful assets. Stay true to your worth, because when others fail to see it, you can create your own opportunity.